Well, there is talk about the Postal Service being taken private. You do know that. Not the worst idea I've ever heard. It really isn't. You know, it's a lot different today with between Amazon and UPS and FedEx and all the things that you didn't have. But there is talk about that.
Oh, he's right. People have been talking about privatizing the post office for a long time. Decades, in fact. People who want to destroy a bastion of unionized labor and turn the nation's very popular mail system into yet another exploitative for-profit entity like everything else. And privatization would screw over a lot of Trump voters, but he's never really given a shit about the people who support him anyway. I was actually this last weekend driving around parts of eastern North Carolina, pretty rural parts of the state, where there's nothing for miles and miles and miles, and then you come across a little patch of houses, and then nothing again for what seemed like an endless stretch of winding road. And I swear to you, the thought I had driving through the area, and the same thought I have whenever I drive through other remote parts of the country, is, damn, how do they get the mail all the way out here? And the answer is very carefully. It's difficult. But since the post office operates as though it's a public service and not a shareholder enriching corporation, it does it. And it's done it effectively for centuries. So much so that it consistently ranks among the most popular government agencies with an approval rating in the 70s. So much so that companies like Amazon, which have their own massive logistics networks, still rely on the post office for those hard-to-reach delivery places. And so much so that up until 2006, the post office maintained profitability. Not that that's the way you should measure a public service, which by definition is intended to be run for the public good, not profit. But for the profiteering vultures, the success of the post office, particularly its financial success, was a major blow. What most people, even lawmakers involved in this debate, don't realize is that the post office operates on its own budget. It doesn't depend on government appropriations, meaning privatizing the post office won't save the government any money. But those forces of privatization eventually got their lobbyists to convince enough members of Congress to sabotage the service. In 2006, a Republican Congress passed and George W. Bush signed into law the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, which set into motion the unraveling. It was a poison pill that required the post office to pre-fund retiree health benefits 75 years into the future, essentially for future retirees who hadn't even been born yet, something no other government agency or corporation has ever had to do. So why did conservatives in Congress require the post office to do it? Well, because it was too profitable, actually. As long as the post office was healthy financially, the forces of privatization couldn't touch it. But when the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act was passed in 2006, it suddenly added a $5 billion cost to the post office's budget every single year. $5 billion. Post office had been profitable, but not profitable enough to shoulder that burden. And 2006 was the last year of profitability for it. That set in motion a fiscal crisis, and the post office reacted by raising prices, laying off workers, and closing outposts. And all along the way, calls to privatize got louder and louder, even though the service still boasted high approval ratings. Post office currently controls a large chunk of the mail and parcel delivery system in the country. So the major beneficiaries of privatization would, of course, be the for-profit delivery companies like UPS, FedEx, and increasingly Amazon. They would fill the vacuum. But prices would go up because, unlike the post office, these for-profit companies need to earn enough profit to pay for exorbitant salaries of executives and bloated expense accounts. And as these for-profit companies are allowed to feast on the bones, they're not going to be as willing as the post office to deliver packages to those hard-to-reach parts of the country. They won't be picking up those non-profitable routes, at least not without jacking up prices. So that will make it more difficult for folks in rural parts of the country, many with Trump signs in front of their house right now, to receive their medicine in the mail, or their packages that they order online, or their holiday presents. Privatization would also be devastating for the more than 500,000 workers currently employed by the post office, most of whom are unionized, and more than a fifth of them are Black. As inequality.org noted, the post office has been a source of good, middle-class jobs for African American workers since after the Civil War. So when Republican members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene tweet stuff like, quote, "Selling the Postal Service is a smart decision that keeps our promise to the American people to cut waste, fraud, and abuse," they either don't know what they're talking about or they're lying on behalf of moneyed interests. With Greene, it's usually a little bit of both, because the only purpose of this scheme is to create new lines of profit for the capitalist class as it devours yet another institution for public good in this country. What a goddamn waste. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.